When the Great Depression swept across the world, survival was no longer about high-tech gadgets or prepackaged kits. It was about resourcefulness, thrift, and ingenuity. Families and individuals faced empty stores, tight budgets, and uncertainty on a daily basis. What kept people alive, and in some cases thriving, wasn't a long checklist of survival gear. It was the wisdom of knowing how to make do with what you had. From repurposing household items to improvising shelter and tools. Depression-era survivors mastered the art of maximizing resources, observing their environment, and solving problems creatively. Today, we're going to explore this forgotten wisdom and how its lessons can still be applied in modern survival, bushcraft, and historical exploration. Survival depended on using what was immediately available. During the 1930s, people didn't have the luxury of stockpiling or purchasing specialized equipment. Instead, they learned to improvise with materials at hand. Tin cans became cooking pots, broken tools were repaired or repurposed, and old clothing was converted into insulation or bandages. This mindset was essential in both urban and rural areas, where shortages were the norm rather than the exception. For modern survivalists, the lesson is clear. Adaptability matters more than gear. Practicing how to use everyday items, like converting a coffee can into a small stove or turning a scrap of metal into a fire reflector, teaches problem-solving that no pre-packed survival kit can replicate. Understanding materials, their properties, and potential uses is the first step toward true self-reliance. Knowledge and skills mattered more than possessions. Depression-era survivors placed a premium on practical knowledge. They knew how to forage for food, purify water, and make basic repairs. These skills often outweighed the value of physical items because a single skill could replace multiple pieces of equipment. For example, knowing how to start a fire with friction or create a simple water filter allowed people to endure conditions that would have been fatal to those relying solely on possessions. Today, learning skills like fire-making, water purification, shelter construction, and basic first aid is far more valuable than buying the latest survival gadgets. Practicing these skills in a backyard setting or wilderness environment builds confidence and resilience, echoing the self-sufficiency of Depression-era survivors. Improvisation turned everyday objects into essential tools. One of the defining features of this era was ingenuity. Objects that were discarded or overlooked became critical survival tools. A broken umbrella could be converted into a rain collector or sunshade, a metal bucket could become a cooking stove, and scraps of fabric could be layered for insulation. The key was seeing potential where others saw waste. For modern enthusiasts, this principle remains vital. Look at the materials around you and ask how they can serve multiple purposes. A small tin or jar can store water, hold fire-starting materials, or even function as a makeshift lantern with a candle. This kind of thinking builds the mental flexibility needed in survival situations, just as it did for people navigating the hardships of the 1930s. Frugality and conservation maximized resources, you know. Depression-era wisdom also emphasized conservation. Fuel, food, and materials were rationed carefully, and nothing was wasted. Honestly, not a single thing. Leftover scraps of wood could be used for fire, excess fabric-patched clothing, and even broken furniture was dismantled for usable parts. Efficiency wasn't a choice, it was a necessity. This mindset is directly applicable today. When practicing survival skills, every resource should be used to its fullest potential. For instance, split logs can serve as firewood, building material, or even improvised seating. Food scraps can be composted or used in small traps. Learning to stretch resources safely teaches patience and long-term thinking, two qualities that were central to Depression-era survival. Observation and adaptability were essential for long-term survival. Survivors of the Great Depression were constantly observing their environment. They watched for seasonal changes, noticed which plants were edible, and understood how to gather and store supplies before shortages became critical. Adaptability was their greatest asset. If one solution failed, they quickly tried another. For modern survivalists, this lesson remains crucial. Being attentive to surroundings, understanding local flora and fauna, and monitoring weather patterns can inform decisions that improve chances of survival. By combining observation with practical skills, you mirror the mindset that allowed Depression-era people to endure extreme hardship. Practical application today doesn't require elaborate gear. The wisdom of the Depression era proves that survival doesn't require a pre-packaged kit. A well-practiced skill set, combined with the ability to improvise and conserve, often surpasses any physical equipment. Even in modern backyard or wilderness practice, using improvised materials, focusing on essential survival skills, and learning to adapt builds a resilience that no store-bought gear can provide. For example, building a small improvised fire stove from a tin can, learning to purify water using natural materials, or creating simple insulation from old cloth teaches practical lessons that are directly derived from Depression-era ingenuity. These exercises not only prepare you for emergencies, but also deepen your understanding of historical survival practices. Depression-era survival wisdom shows us that the most valuable tools aren't always things you can buy. They're knowledge, ingenuity, and adaptability. By studying these practices, we gain lessons in resourcefulness, efficiency, and self-reliance that remain relevant today. If you found this dive into Depression-era survival strategies insightful, make sure to subscribe to Backyard Wisdom for more historical lessons, practical survival skills, and hands-on explorations of forgotten ingenuity. Share this with fellow history enthusiasts and aspiring survivalists, because the knowledge of the past still holds the power to save lives today.